Hi, there's a crooked horizon line there. It's better. A bit wobbly. Okay, hello. I want to let you know what we've done so far here. It's Anya Divine here, coming to you from Gladhouse. I'm here with the lovely Mary, and we're doing some landscape painting. We started painting the scene behind. You'll see it in a minute. Well, there it is. I've kind of started something there that I want to finish, but I just wanted to let you know what I did. I found this mount board in a shop yesterday for 90 pence a sheet, so I got quite a lot of it. And then I used this cheap brush, 2-inch brush, and some clear gesso to paint the clear gesso onto it so that I could use oil paint on it. And I'm at the stage now where I've done a bit of this landscape in oil before lunch. I don't know if you can actually see very clearly there, but I painted the dark line of trees and the lighter line of kind of bushes and deciduous trees in the foreground, and then just gave myself an idea of the brightness of the water against the lime coloured land, the little sliver of land that comes through it. And then we painted the shadow that's on the water. But what I want to do now, coming back after an hour or two, lovely lunch, nice swim, is to bring some of the mid-tones and the lightest parts back into it. So I put out some sap green, and I'm aiming to paint these lovely bushes here. I was inspired by Mary's painting of the bushes, so I want to do that before I go onto the water, and then I'll do the water. So thanks very much for, here I am. Thanks very much for joining me. I think you can see the landscape I'm looking at. Where is it? Yeah, you can see it like there. I think that's where I'm painting, is it? Oh no, it's not, it's over there. I'm putting my finger around the circle. Yeah. It's up at there, I think. Okay, so I'll sit down now. It might be a bit wobbly. Apologise in advance. There we are. Okay, so yeah, you can see that there. So what am I going to do now? The greens. I'm going to put you down a bit. You won't be able to see the what I'm painting, but I want to not have to hold my hand up so high, and I can put a photograph into the Facebook page if you need to see what I'm actually painting here. Okay, so I want to explain the brightness of the bushes there. I'm using the 1-inch brush. Go for the biggest brush you can. We need some more yellow. I think the cadmium yellow is the one with the sap green to make that rich yellowy green deciduous tree colour. So I've got my palette on my knee here, and this here is that is the cadmium yellow, and that's the sap green. And I think those two together will find a colour that will represent the green bushes there. Maybe I'll put in a little touch of white now that I feel I'm you know, coming to the big decisions in the painting. I want to make some big decisions, and I might as well put the bright, I might as well lighten it with some white. So I'm looking at finding the colour. As I'm looking at the bushes, I'm looking at my palette from one to the other, in order that I can really find the brightness, so that I can really find the brightness and the colour that I'm looking for. Sometimes it's helpful to hold the palette up and to see at the top, you know, to make your colour at the top and then hold it up to the thing that you're painting. And of course, whatever colour background you've got, and I've got a dark blue background on the mount board here, will affect how the colour goes on. So I'm just playing by ear really first to see if I can get it looking right against my palette, and then I'm going to put it onto the painting. So I think I've got a colour that reads as being as bright. That's maybe too bright, isn't it? I think I could dull that down now and make it less colourful with some burnt sienna, because it's looking a little bit too colourful. Mary, are you okay? You're going to carry on painting? Okay, and I'll give you a shout when I'm doing the water, or I can pass on the video anyway. So here, yeah, I think that's maybe a better colour. You see, it's a bit more muted. So although it's a very bright light that's falling on the trees, in relation, say, to the sky, and there's only a tiny bit of sky, but in relation to the water, it's not that bright. So that's why I muted it with some burnt sienna, after putting the white in. It felt like it was just a little bit brighter than I wanted it to be. And even still, I think I could do with a bit more green to deepen the tone. So green and burnt sienna. I'm using some viridian green as well as the sap green to create the slightly mid-tone that's here and there in places. So that was kind of the highest, brightest part that I was getting first. And really, it's the mid-tone. That's the helpful one to get in this instance, I think. So let me see, where am I looking? Yeah, okay, so the light has changed a little bit, but we had these bushes in the front that were almost the same size as the shadow of the bushes behind here. I don't have any easel now today, so I'm just holding the mount board, but it's okay. It kind of gives me a feeling of movement, and that I may as well make quick decisions because I'll end up with a sore arm otherwise. So Mary, we were talking about the V shapes between the trees. That's what I'm going to do right now, I think, is the colour of the land behind and bring it down. Although the sun stopped shining on the land behind it, the clouds are moving swiftly enough, so I think it'll come out again. Let me see. Yeah, so there's some conifers in the background that the tips of the conifers are divided by the colour of the bright colour of the land behind, the hills behind there. It's funny how you can get lost in a landscape. So I have some, like I've got these two trees here as my focal point, or as something that I can kind of come back to as an anchor. And so I'm just painting the brightness of the hill behind. It's maybe not quite that bright, but just for me to explain the edge of the trees, it helps me to for now to leave it that bright, the contrast. And when the sun shines on it, it is that bright actually. Just a bit more yellow ochre into it. So I'm going to find the colour of the hill as it comes all the way up there to the top where it meets the sky. And then I'm going to start painting the sky. Because I was quite pleased to see that there was just one little sliver of sky available to paint. And it'll be reflected, that colour will be in the water as well. Now, as well as the sky, I want to bring some more of this colour into wherever I see it. And at the moment I'm seeing the land behind is brightening up behind this little bunch of conifers. I'm not so keen to explain the V shape of conifer trees on the land behind for now. It just seems like a bit of a distraction. So I'll just focus again on the actual colour, the brightness of the hill when the sun shines on it, and how it divides up the conifers, the tips of the conifers. And that's enough. If you've got the bottom horizontal where the conifers meet the land below it, and then if you've got the dividing triangles of the field behind coming in between them, you've got the whole row of trees explained then. It's like a shorthand way of describing the line of trees clearly without going into every single detail. And I've just noticed a very pleasing flash of field colour back there as well. So it's like 1, 2, 3, having a few different flashes. At any point, if you want to come and just watch, Mary, you're very welcome, you know that. But this will be on video, of course, so you may as well. Mary has really inspired me with the colours of her trees, got me wanting to make mine more colourful. Yeah, and so I'm going to use that cadmium yellow to make the land stand out even more, because to me it seems a bit brighter. I might have some cadmium red in there too, actually, because to me the land that's in front now needs to be given a brighter quality. You see that? Bringing it up into a slightly more orange tone seems to work for me. And I know it's gone back into the shade, but there was something similar back here, I thought, earlier on, where it meets the water. Just a kind of more subdued, thinner line, but they're all the same. So that's the orangey. And then in the front here, it's maybe not that bright, but I wanted it to be painted as I saw it, and then I'm just going to subdue it with some white. It's because it feels to me like the land over there is a little bit more peachy coloured almost. You know, as though it's got some white in the mix. And now the pièce de résistance is, let's see, hang on. I'm just going to put more land here. I want to get onto the water and the sky next. Yeah, okay. And you know, I think it might be a good idea, looking at my palette, to start off a new sheet. So don't skimp on your palette if you feel like everything is a bit mixed up. Just move on to a new sheet. You should be able to easily tear it out. There we are. And I'm just going to take my palette knives. I'll just take with my finger. I can take the white off there, because the water to me looks like it's a combination. Of course, it will be white, but there is also some ultramarine blue. Look at me, what I'm doing here now is getting really dirty. Can you see? There's some ultramarine blue on the palette. That'll be handy for the water as well, I think. And some burnt sienna. And some alizarin. I'll just bring the colours that are here. And then, and the cadmium red is there too. I may as well bring that out. I might need that again. But the main thing here is to clean up the space around so that I can mix the water cleanly. I have to dry the oil paint off my hands now. Okay. And of course, an important feature of getting your colour clean is to have a clean brush. So instead of trying to wash all that off the brush in situ, I'm just going to get a new brush and some new tarps. So I'm using the 1-inch brush here. Sorry. 1-inch brush and some new tarps. That's the 1-inch brush, and this is my palette. And I'm wanting to make the colour that's there. So what other colour do I need? I think I need maybe a yellow, because I don't think it's simply only ultramarine blue on its own. Maybe a touch of ultramarine blue, purpley. Yeah, maybe that would work for the back. The background is quite purpley blue. And when I say the background, I mean the top of the water, where it meets the orangey land. And anything where you've got contrast is helpful. So purple and yellow are contrasting colours. And do you remember how I made the cadmium yellow go into the land just above the water? I think that will mean that it'll be quite pleasing then to bring the bluish tone of the water, the purpley blue, in to meet the orangey yellow. Are you seeing what I'm doing here? So I'm pushing the brush up to meet the land and kind of shaking it a little bit so that the paint leaves the brush, and then lifting off. Mount board is quite a pleasing surface to work on, you know. And you do really want there to be a clean edge to the water. And in this instance the water is a bit darker than I have it, so I'm going to put more blue and a little bit more of the burnt sienna into that colour. Like when I half close my eyes, the water now has gone quite a bit darker than it was when we first started painting at the top where it meets the land. And there's no reason for me not to do that, you know. It's quite nice to follow the, unless it really goes against your inspiration for the painting, I think it's good to follow the weather and within reason to paint what's now in front of you, you know, not to be just holding on to a memory, but do your best to identify what is it that's here now and how does it read and what's the pattern of the water and how could I explain that. And even the background paper might be good enough in places as the colour of the water, but it's a significant bright area in the painting in relation to the land, and it's a significant thing too in that the contrast of the horizontals of the water is exciting in relation to the more opaque areas of colour in the trees and in the hills behind. So do you see how I'm trying to get a continuous horizontal line with the brush by holding the brush parallel to the paper and just really keeping my hand as steady as I can. And the fact that the gesso was put on with a fairly big brush, there's lumps and it's catching the texture of the paper, which helps me to get the feeling of the shimmering water as it meets the shadow on the water. So I think I'm quite happy that there's a feeling of water about this. And now and then you could do that where I'm just creating a really clear horizontal line to describe the top edge of the water where it meets the vegetation above it. And see this bit here stopping suddenly? I don't want that, because I think the feature of what I'm looking at is the continuous horizontals of the water pattern. So I'm really wanting the energy of the water to be over and back like that in this light area particularly. And when I half close my eyes, I might put a touch. I've got some cadmium yellow on the palette, but I need a bit more. I was thinking I might put a touch of cadmium yellow into the ultramarine blue in order to more truly explain the shadow of the water, the shadow of the trees in the water, the reflection of the trees in the water. But what have I got here now? So I've got some blue. What was I going to do with that, I wonder? I've got some thick blue paint on the brush. I think sometimes it's a good idea to pull down the marks. Mary, you were talking about that earlier, whether you'd pull down the darks in the reflection or pull them across. Most often I would say to pull them across. But in some places, like here, I want to re-establish the dark tone that's at the top of the water. And I think it would be helpful for me to get a really clean horizontal edge at the top of that mark. And to kind of let it be a horizontal, long, thin rectangle all of its own there. That shape. Do you get me? Long, thin rectangle. So pulling it down creates that clean geometric shape. And it sets it apart a little bit too from the more patterned, shimmering, stippled water below it. If you are stippling, it might be a good idea to put some masking tape down so that the edge isn't all stippled, because it'll read more as a tree than the edge of the clean, clear, crisp water line. If you just stipple all the edges. So here and there I'm putting on this thicker paint, and I'm going to make it lighter. So I'm just mixing some white into that thick paint, because I really want there to be a drama in the difference between the water and the land. And to create that drama, I'm going to have to sacrifice my horizontal lines, because what I'm much preferring here is the brightness of the water, and when I pull it down over the horizontals, it gives me more of a substance. There's more of because the brightness of the water is a significant feature of this image, and so I want the water to have more substance than I'd had when I was just doing the lost and found horizontal pulls. But I think they're both coming into effect here. So you can do your vertical pulls down the way, and then you'll find that there comes a time when you want to go back and subdue them a little bit by pulling the brush across them again. And if you know you're going to be using a lot of paint, put out a lot of paint, because there's nothing worse than having to stop looking to go and find your tube, and which is what I'm going to have to do in a minute. Now, I have some linseed oil here, which I quite like how it makes the paint move more fluidly, especially on the mount board, which soaks up the paint fairly. It soaks the oil, it sponges the oil out of the paint. So I'm using the linseed oil as a way of keeping the paint fluid and viscous on the surface. Yeah, Mary, there's quite a few different techniques there for making the water, but you'll see it on the video after as well. I had, things I told you, I've changed. I've changed my mind about a few of those things, and I think that's what you find when you go to paint, that actually your plans can go out the window sometimes. And instead of doing all the horizontals, up and down marks are working out quite nicely, I think. And then some horizontals. And having the dark down first allows me to bring some printed marks in for ripples. And again, I think I'll use a bit more of the linseed. Do a bit more of the linseed oil in order that those ripples aren't very hairy. Try not to make them too hairy at the edge. And then there's more, like if I had a massive brush, which I do actually, so I might just use this one. So I'm washing the gesso off it, and now I'm going to put out a lot of oil paint, a lot of white oil paint, and I might use the got a nice big tube of titanium oil paint here, and I might use the big brush and mix up a colour that will represent the foreground. Very often the foreground painted with a big brush does the job of creating distance and depth for you, because the bigger marks read as though they're closer to us. Right, so now I've got, you're probably better, like my friend Damien would say, mix with a palette knife and paint with a brush, but I'm a bit too impatient for that, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to mix with the brush and paint with the brush in this instance. And it's a cheap brush, so I'm not too fussed. Just a few pounds. So do you see that consistency? Mary, that's quite nice, isn't it? Creamy consistency for the foreground water. And I thought then that, and you know how we were speaking about the ripples. Oh, I need some linseed. I'll just use the linseed oil that's in here, because that really spreads it. It stops it being hairy. So what am I doing with that now? I'm going to pick up the linseed oil on the brush. And we were talking about the ripples going in a different direction, and they are here, aren't they? They're going, I was thinking all ripples are horizontal, but it's just at the back. And in the foreground, there's a kind of a dynamic pull that way. I would be inclined, because I don't want the hairiness, I would be inclined to get more linseed oil and keep the hairy texture for the, you know, the kind of pulled across the texture there, so that it's got a feeling of ripples and shimmery water in the distance. And then in the foreground, I would want there to be more dynamic moves, either using linseed oil or even runnier, more zested or more sans eau or whatever you're using for thinning your oil paint and washing your brushes. I would use that to create the foreground section of water. And I think always in the foreground I like to do a bit of a splash or something, so that there's a bit of texture and it comes closer to us, you know, without making it I'm just wanting to get the direction of those ripples. There's something about those lines that I wanted to explain a bit more clearly. And underneath, it's not really blue like I've got, it's more green like the landscape is, but I think here and there, if I can manage to just pick out a few areas of green, it'll represent the reflection of the landscape. Oh, and what about the sky? So I'll use the colour of the land. Just, it's only a little section of sky, and it's not really the colour of the sky, but I think all I need is something bright there in that little corner, and hopefully it'll read as sky beyond the hill. Kinda. It might be helpful to have a bit more, but I don't want to I don't want to make the hills lower than they are, any more lower than they are. So I'm going to leave it like that. And I suppose the thing that I might end up making different might be filling in a bit more of the hill there, to make it more green than blue. It's not at all green really, that corner. And while I've got the white on the brush, I'm noticing that there's a lovely bright section of water again revealed just now. I'll pick some more up here. Using a ridge of paint on the brush, I'll turn it over so that the brightest bits are really thick. And the brights being really thick will assist you, because the ridge of paint will catch the actual light too. And just there's something, they say that about paint, that it's good to paint the brights with thicker paints and the thin areas and the dark areas with thinner paint. Now there's a little bit of cadmium yellow on the brush, but I'm going to chance it, because I think it's not quite as bright over there anyway. You know, it's kind of partly the logistics of trying to reach everything and make sure that I keep the momentum up for myself as well. But I do want to put a bit more clean paint on there, because Mary, that was the part, wasn't it, that we were excited about, the little sliver of white luminous water, the triangle of luminous water as it comes in there. So I've tried my best to get a ridge of paint on the edge of the brush, and I'm turning it over and placing the square edge of the brush there to create the line at the top of the water. And I mean, it's bright enough already pulled in there, but I can increase the thickness of the bright area so that it's further highlighted. The part that has the most contrast will be the part that our eye goes to, and I want there to be contrast here because I love the tops of the trees and the bright hills beyond. I love the brightness of the water and the crisp land as it meets the water. So these are the areas that I'm focusing on for my appreciation and my enjoyment, and that's what I want the painting to oh good, you can still see it. That's what I want the painting to evoke in the viewer, as well as those things that inspired me as I was looking at it. You know, I think I'm kind of I feel like these days I want to stop earlier. I want to stop before, you know, like they say with food, before when you're 80% full, stop. And I'm gonna stop. And I always say that, don't I? And then I end up doing more. But what I noticed there, and I said I wanted to stop, that's a sure way of getting yourself to see what really needs to be done. And I felt that I could do with putting something a bit more into these bushes, because that again was one of the first things that excited me about this, was the contrast between that bush and the dark of the conifer trees behind. And so I just want to give it a little bit more attention. And again, if you know, I would advise, unlike what I've done here, I would advise for myself the next time that I'd have set everything up so I have all the colours easily to hand. I'm kind of accepting a slightly, well, I am finding this green. So it's an ultramarine blue, cadmium red, no, ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow, and a touch of white. I was thinking that I was kind of compromising on colour, but I am seeing this colour as I put it down. And I feel like it's a good idea to have more than one shade of green, naturally. There's so many shades of green, isn't there, in the environment? And that same colour that I've just used here will help me in explaining the sky, in explaining the land as it comes up to meet the sky here. And there's something about this small brush that's for some reason pleasing to me at the moment. I think I want there to be a slightly different mark, and very thin, so I've just thinned down the colour with sans odor to make this read as land rather than blue background. And it's okay to have some of the blue background showing through, but generally I think I wanted to read a bit more as land and hillside. Okay. Yeah, so I've avoided the V of the trees behind, and I'm just going to pretend that there's a similar colour that I've used up there that's down here as well, where the V is. So I'm kind of making, just rather than making it up, I'm eliminating something and putting in the colour of the hills instead. The reason I'm not putting the V in is because I think it's a feature that might be just confusing in a painting. And it's not it wasn't interesting to me. It was more, the interest was in the dark of the trees and how they meet the light of the land behind. So I don't see why I would then obscure that and draw attention away from that by putting in this quirky V shape of planted trees behind. Somebody else might find that they're the most interesting part of the landscape, and more power to them. Like. Okay. Right, and there might be another little bit of sky in that corner too. I'm going to pretend that there is, I think. Am I? No, I'm not. What are you doing there? Oh, great stuff.
I had to stop because I couldn't get to paint.
Oh, why?
I've been watching it.
So I'm going to log off. Let me just... Oh, there you are. Okay, so that's... I think I'm going to stop there. We've got the foreground water, the middle textured bit, and then the top that's brighter. And the bright on the hills behind the dark trees. Okay, and that's all oil paint with turps and linseed oil. So thanks very much for joining us, and I'll see you next time. Bye.